Hello, Nicole. It's lovely to have you join us at One Woman's Journey today. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Oh, you're welcome. You're very welcome. So perhaps you'd just like to start off by telling people a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. That's it's always such a wide question that I'm always kind of like, oh, which bit can I which bit of the story shall I tell? So yeah, I guess the first thing that comes to mind is that I'm here. I'm a new mum, so so this nearly didn't happen because this morning I've not had very much sleep. So so it was interesting, even just that kind of experience of, oh, do I cancel this, or do I just turn up anyway and see what happens, because who knows what I might say after
Exactly.
0 hours sleep. But yeah, so that was an interesting one, and it again shows something about the nature of thought, I think, in general. But I guess it'd be good to start kind of right at the beginning, I guess, because pre-principles. Pre-principles. I'm a life coach now, and I specialise in kind of helping creatives, which is everyone, to kind of live soul-led lives, by embracing what I like to call their wild alchemy. And that's something that I'm kind of launching into more in 2021, because I've been having a little bit of a break recently. But I did a lot about kind of self-rediscovery before, and that's how my journey with the principles has felt to me, really. It's this idea that we're kind of rediscovering something about ourselves that we always kind of knew, but actually we didn't see because we were clouded by some kind of thinking. And I guess just to tell you a little bit about myself and my journey before the principles. I was very young when my dad left. I was 4 years old, and it was the first day of school. And from that, I kind of took this idea that I was really unlovable, and kind of nurtured that thinking, I guess, throughout life. And it really impacted kind of how I showed up in the world. So I was quite shy at school. I didn't have a lot of friends, or I probably did have a lot of friends, but I didn't think that I did have. And it also kind of led me to this idea that I had to behave in a certain way to be lovable. And although, you know, I had a very loving family otherwise, and I did have a lot of love, I still had this idea that I had to do more or be more. And so I quickly burnt out at the age of 10 with chronic fatigue syndrome, and I ended up missing a year of school because I was just trying so hard, and I burnt myself out. And that actually later happened again when I was about 21, but there were several things that kind of, I guess, reinforced that, and it looked like they were causing me to have that thinking. So for example, when I was 17, my dad bought me Slim Fast for my birthday. Now in his world, he was trying to be helpful because I felt like I was quite big. Make sense to him. I didn't see that at the time though, so it kind of triggered an eating disorder, I guess, via the thinking that I had. And so there was just lots, really, and by the age of 23, I think it was, I then had chronic fatigue again, because I had kind of dived into a career that I felt I should be doing rather than one that I loved, just because, again, I had this idea that I needed to be more lovable. So I guess the theme really along the whole of my life was this idea that I was so unlovable that I just had to be good, be a good girl, and and do things that I should be doing, really. And quite quickly I burnt out from that. So that was kind of pre-principles, I guess.
I love the way you say you nurtured that belief, you know, from a young age, that you weren't lovable. And I think that's what happens innocently, isn't it? As children, we think something, and then we sort of add to it and believe it, and it becomes it goes from just a passing thought to quite a core belief in our development growing up, and how that then impacts us. And all that sort of child making decisions around, I don't feel lovable, so I must strive, you know, must work very, very hard to be whatever perception you make up as a lovable person. You know, and how the body is so adept at saying, hang on, you know, what's happening here is not healthy for you.
I love that. And I also particularly love kind of the distinction, because when I first came to the principles, I kind of grasped the concept of thought quite quickly. I was like, oh, this is amazing. But then I suddenly so the first kind of part of my journey was like, oh, well, it's just a thought, so it doesn't matter. And then I was like, oh no, thought's like this powerful creative force. And actually we're human, so it does kind of filter through and impact how we feel in our bodies. So that was quite an interesting, I guess, learning curve when I was ill with chronic fatigue as well, kind of seeing how that impacted, when we have a thought that we believe, it does play out in our bodies. And I think that was quite an interesting thing that I began to see with the principles really as well.
I mean, those like thoughts just multiply, don't they? They're like cells that just keep multiplying.
And yet they can dissolve quite quickly when you see them for what they are as well. And that was, I guess, my experience when I first came across the principles. I'd kind of dived into lots of different self-help things, being the fixer that I was, and I really saw that I wasn't broken in the end, and that they kind of fell away. Although in the kind of later part of my journey, I have kind of seen the beauty in those, and that's why I talk about wild alchemy, because I think now I have seen that actually where I kind of once saw through the need to kind of meditate or do yoga or anything, I kind of ditched it all for a while, because I was like, oh, I'm not broken, this is great. I am livable after all, who knew? I kind of ditched those, but then I began to see that there was this kind of beautiful gift in embracing all of our humanness, and even kind of the more stuff that we would judge as negative, I guess, and the negative stuff, it all teaches us something really valuable. So then I began to get really excited about being human, and that was quite cool. So, but I guess the first thing that I saw was that I was lovable, and not just that. I think bigger than that. I think the thing that I saw was that I was love. That was kind of my fundamental nature. So, I am lovable or I am not lovable is still just a thought. It's still just content. Whereas actually what I saw with the principles was that there's this kind of wisdom or natural intelligence that's somehow bigger than us. And that has lots of different labels. And even for me, it has lots of different labels. It can be seen in nature, or it can be seen in, wisdom to me is a word that I use. But love is another one. And I think that was one of my big realizations that freed a lot for me, because I realized that actually how can I not be lovable, and how can I not be lovable when I am love itself, and it comes from me, and that's the biggest thing. It's like, that's kind of where it got a bit juicier, because I was like, oh, I don't need to be good anymore, now I can just play. That's why I kind of called it wild magic, because I can see actually now, wild is something to be embraced. I remember when I was giving birth just recently, and I had quite a traumatic birth. It was like the full works, really. And I'd never kind of, for a while, I hadn't really associated the word wild with myself, but right towards the end I did get quite angry, because I'd had some quite bad treatment in there. What I would judge as bad treatment, I guess, is still kind of me creating it, but it was interesting, because I kind of just let rip a little bit at them. And because I was in my thinking and my misunderstanding, or my humanness, I guess I would prefer to call that. And they said, oh, we're going to have to start monitoring you for postnatal psychosis. And in my head, I was like, oh my gosh, because at one point before the principles, I would have suffered with anxiety. I was like, oh, and then I kind of laughed and was like, oh, because I'm being wild, because I'm speaking my truth, it's not acceptable in society. It just doesn't make sense to people. So that was all that was going on. And I was like, wow, that's amazing, really. Just because we're having an emotion that's human. I'm giving birth in COVID. My partner's being told to go home. I've just literally been through like a 25-hour labour. and I've got stitches, and you want to send my partner home. And I was like, no, this isn't on. That's quite human, really, I would say. But it looked to them like I just got this mental illness. And I was like, oh, thank goodness I know that I'm mentally healthy.
And that's always there, isn't it? Just, other than when we think something different in our minds. But you shared a lot there around moving from it's just a thought to, and it's not about swapping or trying to control the thought from I'm not lovable to trying to enforce the thought of yes, I am lovable. It went much deeper than that in terms of I am love, and how can that not be lovable? And that's a much deeper understanding, isn't it? And also it seems that you started to see that the power that created the negative belief and the nurturing around the original sort of negative beliefs, you began to see actually thought is quite powerful. And how does that work in a really positive way, in the way we create.
Exactly. And that's what I love about it now. It's like, oh wait, we can use thought for like anything. We can create whatever we desire, and it's really exciting. And I love I don't know if you know Dominic Scafidi, but I've been doing loads of stuff with him, and we're creating an exciting program as well. I hope he doesn't mind me saying that. but we're working on something really fun for next year. And I just love kind of seeing how we're already creating. Everybody can kind of think, we need to be more creative, but actually, we're already creating our lives via our thinking, and there's nothing really extra that we need to do. We're already doing it. But it's just seeing that and seeing that kind of offers a freedom for us to create a life that we love and do whatever we want. And that's something that I saw very much when I had chronic fatigue. I was kind of stuck in a career that I liked, but it was very stressful. And I was a brand manager, and it was hard work. And it did kind of, I burnt myself out with trying to be so perfect at it. And I kind of, in that letting go of that, the illusion kind of shattered that I really needed to do something that I didn't enjoy. And so since then, I've really just created my life to be what I want, and kind of followed the path of things that light me up and fulfill my soul. So that's why I kind of talk about this wild alchemy, because not only did I realize, even giving birth, that I was wild, and that was okay. We don't need to be scared of being ourselves, but there's this kind of magic that happens when we do just follow that feeling and start creating in a way that feels good, if that makes sense.
And I love that wild alchemy, that's what is happening actually in every moment, and in every human being. We are creating, and that doesn't relate to being an artist or a sculptor, or it does relate to those things, but not that's not what we, it's not as narrow as that when we talk about being creative. We are creating our experience, aren't we?
Exactly.
In every moment, and certainly not always aware of that, and it's a wonderful discovery, isn't it?
It is, and that's why I had a summit, and I called it the Self-Rediscovery Summit, because all the wild alchemy that I talk about is already there, like you say. It's just that we need to rediscover it, because it's kind of hiding beneath all those thoughts that don't feel so good, that we're creating, that just don't feel so nice. And I think it's just seeing that, it's just rediscovering that that's there all the time. That was what was magical for me, and it felt magic, and that's why I kind of called it wild alchemy, because it's like that's a fun feeling to it.
So it just sounds so expressive, and exciting and open, and all of those things that perhaps we feel that we can't always express. You being angry in the hospital, those types of emotions and feelings, it's like, okay, this is not acceptable behavior, and it's just like, why isn't it? This is what I'm feeling in the moment, and expressing that. And I think our expression in all sorts of ways, we just become sort of conditioned that what's okay and what's not okay to express. Really.
And it was really funny, because I'm a writer as well, so I used to kind of have poems kind of flow through me, I guess. They were creating as me, as I like to say. And for a long time I just wrote, but I really wanted to talk, so do things like this. And I remember I went to Bali, and I was doing a yin yoga training, and it was the first time, because I just, for my whole life, I'd felt like nobody had heard me. And I sat there and I realized, I was like, oh no, it's not that people haven't heard me, it's that I haven't talked. And that was quite powerful, because I realized, again, it was that self-editing, and it's very easy in writing to kind of edit yourself as you go along. She's like, oh no, I'll just delete that bit, I'm not sure about that. Although I have published some things that some people haven't liked at times, I must admit, and they've kind of judged me for. But it's very different when you're speaking, and I think that's something that I love to help people with as well, is kind of speaking their truth, because there's a real power and freedom in that as well, and knowing that you are love is kind of the key to that, really. And
could you say a little bit more about how you sort of discovered that you are love, and how that sort of came about for you?
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the big things, because my dad left when I was 4, so he had disappeared. But I had a difficult relationship, and this is quite a story actually. But it's I was basically getting married, and I was marrying my lovely partner. I've been with him for 10 years, but his family hated me. And just before I got married, they actually said that. They were like, Nicole, you know, we don't really like you, but we'll try. And I, being me at the time, was kind of like, I gave them a big hug and thanked them for trying to like me, because, you know, I'm not lovable, so therefore I must try harder. Yeah. So I was going through that, and actually I'd got a best friend of 10 years who just before I got married told me that he had been in love with me for 13 years I'd known him, and he'd never told me that before, but and in the end, because I felt the same about him, but I ended up getting married because that was the right thing to do. But it just didn't, it wasn't. And also I was kind of around the principles and saw that you can make things work, which you can. But also I began to see that actually you can make things work, but also we're human again, and we can also choose the life that we desire. And in the end, I ended up losing my friend because he just disappeared, and he didn't want to be there. So, but it was painful because he'd been my best friend for 13 years. But what I saw was in his absence, because again, it felt very much a reminder of my dad leaving, because he had been there and then he disappeared. And so that kind of brought all that up again. And I realized one day, because I was around the principals, and I thought, but the love's still here, even though he isn't. That's interesting. That's interesting, because he's disappeared. So how can the love still be here? And then I realized the love came from me. So it couldn't disappear. So I realized that the love was completely generated by me, and therefore that's who we are, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, goosebumps, that absolutely makes sense. And to discover that, that actually the love comes from within you.
Yeah.
Whether somebody's actually physically present, or not really, or moved
That's
on, as you say, you're still feeling the love for him. And
there was a lot in it as well, because I ended up getting divorced, but again, there was still a lot of love there in that relationship, and kind of in the falling away of everything, I ended up with the best friend. So now the one that I've had the baby with is indeed that best friend. So the love in physical form did come back as well. So
that's amazing.
It's a nice ending to the story, I guess.
Oh, it's a lovely love story, isn't it? That's it's like, oh yeah, happy ending. Yeah.
But it was actually really important to get that understanding, because it kind of transformed my life. I'm glad that all of that happened in a way, because otherwise I wouldn't have seen, and just going back to when we were talking about messy feelings, there are a lot of those, but I think one of the things I saw in the principles was, when Sid says, if only people knew not to be scared of their emotions, then that would change the world. And I think that's kind of one of my key takeaways as well, is that kind of, it's okay for our lives to be a little bit messy and human, because that's who we are. And without if we wanted to just evade kind of all of that, it would be a bit boring, really, wouldn't it? We wouldn't we wouldn't kind of get to fully embrace being human. So I think it's a gift, really.
Exactly. And I guess people might think, yes, if you follow a spiritual path, then all will be well and everything will be perfect and our lives will be complete. But actually it's very much about the human experience as well, isn't it? And that coming across the principles understanding opens us up in so many ways of seeing and becoming more conscious of how we work and how we sort of create in the human world, whilst not giving us perfectly packaged lives, because we're experiencing, we're learning, we're growing, and embracing that human experience is so much a part, isn't it, of this spiritual understanding, really.
We're given bodies. I always say we're given bodies, so why not dance in them? So.
That's lovely. Dance in them. And I guess that's what we're doing, isn't it? Whether we're aware of it or not, we are dancing the sort of tune of life, really. And with or without awareness. And what I love about this understanding is the awareness and the sort of consciousness of the experience becoming broader and deeper, and it then becoming much more fun.
Exactly. And I think there's two things in that. Is like, one, realizing that life is kind of living us anyway, and that's freeing, because then we don't need to worry. But then seeing that actually, although that's happening, we're still kind of able to choose what we want to focus on and create more of that. And that's what I think I saw is like almost this journey of two things. It's like this realization that there's this amazing power of wisdom or love, or whatever you want to call it, that's there, that's living us, our lives being lived through us or as us. But actually we still get to choose what we want to dance in, as I say, in our human body. And I think there's something magical about that as well. We get to play in life and create what we desire. So it's great.
And that's all encompassing, isn't it? It's like we can dance with the anger, we can dance with the sadness, we can dance with all our emotions. That we're, and not to say that those always feel good, or that sadness and grief and loss and illness, they are real. They're real in our human experience, as much as what would be termed the more positive feelings. But being able to see and have that awareness more in human life has certainly makes a huge difference, doesn't it?
But we were built to hold those feelings as well. It's knowing that, isn't it? I think. And I remember one of my favourite quotes, I say it all the time, is Jeff Foster's feelings are there to be held, not healed. Because that was a big realisation I had, was we don't need healing, we don't need fixing. But the feelings are still okay to have. They're still okay, because we're built to hold them.
Exactly. So there's that sort of innate health and resilience, isn't there? And also discovering that that's what we're made of, and we can do it. You can live your life, and look at your wild alchemy whilst being kept up all night, and your lovely daughter, it's the human and the spiritual, isn't it? Hand in hand. And that's our experience. That's what's happening.
I love that. Look how that just came full circle.
Exactly. It did. Oh, Nicole, it's been an absolute pleasure. It really has to listen to you.
Thank you. I feel good now. I feel awake.
Exactly. Good. You're awake. So nice. So if people would like to hear a bit more from you or get in contact with you, where can they find you?
Yeah, sure. So the best place is probably my website. I've got some exciting stuff on there already, actually. So I've got my Self-Rediscovery Summit, which has got loads of different fun conversations that I was creating this year. And I'm soon hopefully launching a podcast for next year, which will be more wild alchemy. So, and then I've got some group programs that I run, and I work one-to-one with people. So all of those, loads of resources and stuff on my website, and you'll have to let me know when this is published, and I'll pop that on there as well. But yeah, it's just my name, so it's www.nicolebarton.co.uk, and I can give you all the links for those, so that, because people might not know how to spell Nicole, there's various different versions.
Exactly. Nicole, thanks so much. Thank you.
Thank you. No, it's been fun.
Thank you.